Bezat Hashem, today in Masechet Megilla, we're going to learn Tet Zayin Amud Bet 16b, the bottom of the page. Tet Zayin Amud Aleph. We're going to start at the words Lechulam Natan Leish Chalifot Smalot. We're going to start there. Bezat Hashem, we're going to continue on with the discussion of the Purim story, but really we're going off on a bit of a tangent today. We're going to discuss how Yosef treated his brothers when he revealed himself and what this has to do with the Purim story as well. And this will take us into a discussion generally about that incident with Yosef and the brothers, how he tried to comfort them. We're going to speak about a bunch of inyanim relating to that, which will bring us back a little bit to this Purim story at the end of the day today. And then, God willing, actually tomorrow we're going to finish the parak Bezat Hashem. So let's get started. This first part that we're going to begin with, the bottom of Tet Zayin Amud Aleph, is L'chulam Natan Leish Chalifot Smalot. It says when Yosef reveals himself to his brothers. It sounds like unrelated.
Talking about Purim or Yosef?
Right, so very good, Yosef. That's what I was just saying. It seems unrelated, right? That's why we have to have patience, because then we see what's going on. So it seems unrelated.
We talk about
don't worry. I won't leave you in the dark. The Gemara won't either. The Gemara is going to tell us this has something to do with Purim, obviously. But when Yosef reveals himself to his brothers, Yosef, the Mishnah Lamelech, he reveals himself to his brothers, and then he gives gifts to each of his brothers. What we're going to see is that he gave more gifts to his full brother Binyamin than he gave to his other brothers who were half brothers. You know, Binyamin and him were born of the same mother, Rachel and Yaakov, versus the other brothers were half brothers. So the Gemara is going to ask a very interesting question here. Is the whole inyan of Yosef being sold was because of fighting and jealousy? Because he received he received the Kitonet Pasim. He received this multicolored cloak, and that caused the brothers to be jealous. Obviously, it's more complicated than that, but on a simple level, it was because brotherly fighting. And now, Yosef, at the end of the story, doesn't seem to have learned his lesson. Because at the end of the story, ultimately, he seems to do the same thing. Which is that he gives his full brother more gifts than his other brothers. It doesn't seem to be a logical thing for Yosef to do based on his history. So what the Gemara is going to tell us, as we'll see, actually there was a symbolism here that Yosef was referencing to Binyamin, that you're going to have a descendant in the future, which will be Mordechai, who will eventually be paraded around in 5 garments of the royalty of the king, which is a reference to the Purim story. Now, how that answers the question is indeed difficult, because ultimately it's still favoritism. So but that's what the Gemara is going to say, that there's an element here of prophecy that was occurring in this exchange. So let's see. Pasuk says, "Lechulam natan leish chalifot smalot." Each of them he gave a change of clothing to, of garments. Ulebinyamin natan chamesh chalifot. But for Binyamin, he gave 5 garments. So the Gemara asks, "Efshar davar shnitztaer bo tot tzadik." The thing that caused so much suffering for Yosef, that he was sold because of that jealousy that existed between the brothers, because of what he received extra, Tet Zayin Amud Bet now, Yikashel bo, he stumbles in that same thing. Amar Rava bar Machasya, Amar Rav Chama bar Guria, Amar Rav, because we know it said in the name of Rav, Bishvil Mishkal Shnei Slayim Milat Shosif Yaakov LeYosef Mishar Achav Nitgalgela Davar V'Yardu Avotenu LeMitzrayim. Because of the weight of 2 sela of wool, of fine wool, of materials, which is this Kitonet Pasim, that Yaakov gave Yosef extra, it caused the matter that the Jews eventually descended to Egypt. Meaning this seemed to be a causation of jealousy. How could Yosef engage in the same thing? Amar Binyamin bar Yefet, Remez Ramaz Lo. Yosef was giving a hint to Binyamin, She'atid ben latzeit mimenu, that in the future, Binyamin would have a child, Sheyatza milifnei hamelech v'chamisha levushei malchut, who would emerge from in front of the king with 5 clothing of royalty. Shene'emar, like we find that it says by Mordechai yatza belevush malchut techelet v'gomer. It says Mordechai went out in the royal garments of techelet, and it lists 5 different garments of royalty. So the point is, in this verse, even though it does seem to be something that Yosef was doing, seemingly creating the own error that caused his own sale, there was a prophetic vision that occurred here as well. Now that we went on this note, we went off topic, so the Gemara now begins to discuss that storyline a little bit more. If you look in the story there, when he reveals himself, so he gets very emotional, and he cries on Binyamin's neck, and Binyamin cries on his neck. But as we'll see, there's a different way the Psukim bring out the same idea. It says, Vayipol, this is in Parashat Vayigash, it says, Vayipol al tzavre Binyamin achiv, it says, he fell, Yosef fell on his brother Binyamin's neck, and he cried. Now it says tzavare. Now it doesn't say tzavar, which would mean his neck, but it says if he fell on the necks of Binyamin. So the Gemara says, Kama tzavarin avulele Binyamin. How many necks did Binyamin have? Right? Was he born with two heads? What's going on? What does that mean? So Amar Belazar Amar Belazar bacha al shnei miktashim she'atidin liyot bechelko shel Binyamin va'atidin lecharev. The neck is a reference to the Beit HaMikdash. So what happened is Yosef, this is a fascinating thing. Yosef was crying on two of Binyamin's necks. What does it mean? Because the Beit HaMikdash was to be built in the chelek of Binyamin. So he was crying that there would be two Batei Mikdashot created in the chelek of Binyamin, and they would both ultimately be destroyed. It's a fascinating concept, a lot to discuss here, but we don't have time for that. Binyamin bachal tzavarav, when it says Binyamin cried on his neck, it means bachal mishkan Shilo she'atid liyot bechelko shel Yosef ve'atid lecharev. He was crying because Mishkan Shilo, which was where the Mishkan resided for, I think it was 300 something years, if I remember correctly, 369 maybe? We actually spoke about it before, I'll tell you. That was going to be in the portion of Yosef, that would actually be in the portion of Yosef, 369, yeah. And it would ultimately end up being destroyed. This is a fascinating idea, just to tell you, it's something to think about. But why are they crying about the future destruction of temples that haven't even been built yet? And and why are they crying about it now when he reveals himself? There's a lot to discuss here. This seems to be a very fascinating thing. But anyway, let's continue. What happens is, Yosef tries to comfort the brothers. So they're all shocked. Yosef reveals himself, and also, understandably, they think, look, Yosef has authority now, and he's going to take advantage of us. He's going to take retribution, nekama. But he tries to comfort them, and he says like this, V'hine enechem ra'ot, your eyes see, ve'enei achi Binyamin, and the eyes of my brother Binyamin. Amar Belazar, Amar lahem, Yosef was telling them the following, Kishem she'en b'libi al Binyamin achi shelo haya b'mchirati, just like I have no upsetedness towards my brother Binyamin because he wasn't part of the sale, kach ein b'libi alechem, so too I have nothing against you. Meaning he was trying to say is, I have nothing, I don't hold it against you. Kipia medaber alechem, because my mouth that speaks to you. What was he saying? Kifi ken libi, like I'm telling you, that's what I really feel. Means I'm not telling you something that's not true. It's 100% true, I have nothing against you. You shouldn't be worried. Psukim tell us that when the brothers returned to Yaakov, he sent presents. And Yosef and Paro actually sent gifts. It says, Ulaviv shalach kazot nasara chamorim nosim mituv Mitzrayim. It says that to his father, to Yaakov, he sent 10 donkeys, nosim, laden, holding the best of Egypt. My mituv Mitzrayim, that's the best of Egypt. So what would you say is the best of Egypt? The best things Egypt could offer. So Amar Binyamin bar Yefet, Amar Belazar, Shalach lo yayin yashan. He sent old wine. Old wine is the best of Egypt. Shedad zkenim nochai menu, because old people appreciate old wine. So old people appreciate old wine. I guess that's when you hear the chevra drinking. This one tastes like that, and the other one tastes like that. There's something to be said for age, if you appreciate it with age, I guess.
The Maharsha said that it was warming them.
Warming them up,
yeah.
Okay.
And old people are usually cold.
Old people are usually cold. Yeah. Now it says, this is actually the end of the story. This is in Vayechi. After Yaakov passed away, the brothers realized that Yosef stopped inviting them over. So they couldn't understand what's going on, and they assumed, while our father was alive, maybe he was, being nice to us in honor of our father. But now that he's died, now he's going to take nikama, he's going to take revenge. So the Psukim say what they did was, they sent some of the children of Bilhan Zilpah, they sent them over there to tell Yosef that our father commanded us when he was alive, that you shouldn't have anything against us, even though we sold you, etc. And then it says, "Vayelchu gam echa vayiplu lefanav." Afterwards, the other brothers came in front of Yosef, and they presented a similar story. It wasn't actually true, by the way.
How could they say that the father didn't know that?
Correct. It wasn't actually true. It wasn't true. It seems like they made this part of the story up. They just wanted that he shouldn't, because they thought he was gonna take advantage. So Amr ben Yamin bar Yefet, Amr ben Lazar, Hainu da Amr Inchi. This is as people say, Ta'ala be'idne sagidle. A fox in his time you should bow down to him. Meaning to say is that the brothers were bowing down to him, even though theoretically he was one of the brothers, because now he's the king. We have to give him the honor that he is deserving. Rashi in the Chumash, I think Rashi says it here too. 1 second. Yeah, I don't think it's Rashi here. If you there's 1 month a year, I believe Rashi and Chumash says this, where the fox is the king of the forest. I'm not really sure what that means, but usually the lion is the king of the forest. But in the fox's time, you also give him honor. Meaning when he's a king, you give him honor. Now the Gemara doesn't understand the application of this principle, because the Gemara says, Ta'ala, by saying he's a fox, that means it sounds like in general Yosef is lower than the brothers, but that's not true. My bitzirotei me'achvo, how is he lower than his brothers? The implication is now give him honor, but usually you don't have to. But what do you mean? In general, he's an equal, and now he's actually the king, so why would you say that expression in this situation? Where could we apply this expression? It's earlier on in the story. Earlier in the story in Vayechi, when Yaakov is in bed and Yosef comes to visit him, it says, Vayishtachu Yisrael rosh hamita. Yaakov bowed towards the head of the bed. That's where you can apply this, because Yaakov is the father here. So for a father to bow down to his son, it's disrespectful for the father. But since he's a king, you give him honor in this moment because he's the one who's in power right now. Actually, Yaakov had also something he was asking. He was asking Yosef to bury him in Eretz Yisrael. We know the story there. That's a different business. Fine. So it says at the end of the story, when they're concerned he'll take revenge, he comforted them and he spoke on their hearts. It means he spoke in comforting ways towards them. Now, Vayidaber libam implies that he had some sort of an argument that calmed them down from being nervous. Amr ben Yamin bar Yefet, Amr ben Lazar, Melamed, teaches us, She'amar lahem dvarim shemitkablim ala lev. He told them something that's easily accepted on the heart. It means something that they could appreciate what he was saying. What did he say? If 10 candles could not extinguish 1 candle, means we tried to get rid of you, and we were not successful in getting rid of you. You tried to get rid of me, excuse me. Means Yosef told them, you 10 brothers tried to get rid of me, and you were not successful. Ultimately, not only did you not get rid of me, but I ascended to the height of power. That's what happened. So ner echad, so 1 candle, referring to himself, how could it extinguish 10 candles? So meaning what he was really saying was, you couldn't get rid of me and you're 10 and I'm 1. Certainly, you don't have to worry about me. I'm not going to do anything to you. Now, it almost sounds like a threat, but really what he was saying is, you don't have to worry. That's the simple pshat, at least. You don't have to worry. I'm not going to do anything towards you. All right, now we go back to the Purim story. Don't worry. So, what happened at the end of the Purim story, it says, right, they're saved, etc. And it says, La Yehudim haita ora v'simcha v'sason v'yikar. We say it in Havdalah every week. La Yehudim haita ora. The Jews had ora, it's light. Simcha, joy. Sason, gladness. V'yikar is honor. So the Gemara understands each of these words refers to something that there was a decree that they were not allowed to engage with under Haman, and then after Haman was killed and the decree was revoked, or that it was, I guess you could say, that it was a Geulah, these things were then permitted to do again. Amar Rav Yehuda, Orazu Torah. Ora refers to Torah. Second. It sounds like there was a decree. It's very interesting. That there was a decree they couldn't engage in Torah. So after the Geulah, they were then allowed to again. V'cheinu omer, like it says in Mishlei, ki ner mitzvah v'Torah or. It says ner, the mitzvah is compared to a ner, a candle, and the Torah is compared to or, to fire, to light. Simcha ze Yom Tov. Simcha refers to Yom Tov, which is holidays. V'cheinu omer, like it says in Re'eh, it says v'samachta b'chagecha. We see there's an association v'samachta b'chagecha. Now in this context, it seems like either it could mean they were not allowed to engage in Yom Tov under Haman, or it means they created a Yom Tov. Simple pshat means they created Yom Tov of Purim. Sason zo milah. And it sounds like, again, they were not allowed to do milah under Haman. Sason refers to milah. V'cheinu omer, like it says in Tehillim, Sas anochi alim ratecha, I rejoice over your teachings. So Rashi tells us that David HaMelech in this chapter in Tehillim, it's Tehillim Kuf Yutet actually, he tells us that David HaMelech had a sas, he had a special joy with milah. Why? So the Gemara in Menachot tells us, because it's based on a pasuk in actually Tehillim Vav. It says when David HaMelech went into the bathhouse, the merchatz. When you go into the bathhouse, you can't learn Torah, and you're also not allowed to do mitzvot. It's like a bathroom, you're not allowed to. So he felt a certain sadness, but when he realized that he has Brit Milah, which goes with him wherever he goes, so that brought him a sense of joy. Meaning it brought him a sense of joy in that there's a mitzvah that always goes with him. Interesting idea. So that's sas. V'yikar elu tefillin, and yikar refers to tefillin. V'cheinu omer, like it says in Kitavo, it says, V'ra'u kol amei ha'aretz ki shem Hashem nikra alecha v'yar'u mimeka. It says, all the nations of the world will see that the name of Hashem is called upon you, and they will fear you. The Tanya in the Braita says, Eliezer Agadol Omer, Elu tefillin sheberosh. This refers to the tefillin on one's head. That when the goyim see the tefillin on our head, there is a certain natural awe that they have from us. So you'll say, well, wait a second. Somebody just told me that he was walking around in the street with tefillin. I guess we don't usually walk around with tefillin in the street anyways. But that's the idea of yikar. There's an honor. There's a natural honor that comes from wearing tefillin. So it seems again that perhaps Haman had made a decree against tefillin, and afterwards they were again able to wear tefillin. Okay, now let's talk about some of the halachot now of reading the Megillah. This gets into something interesting. You know, when it lists the 10 sons of Haman, ve'et, this, ve'et, 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 it goes through, and they're written in a unique way too, like in a line almost, meaning it's like a bracket, you see. So the Gemara tells us ve'et, says ve'et parshandata, and then at the end it says aseret b'nei Haman. So Amravada Demin Yafo, aseret b'nei Haman va'aseret, the 10 names of the sons of Haman, and the word aseret after tzarich lememrenu b'neshima achat. It needs to be said in one breath. And the Chazan usually he takes a breath before, and then he says it all quickly because he tries to say it all in one breath. My time, what's the reason? Because kule bahade adadi nafku nishmatayu. It commemorates how they all died at the same time. They were all hung and they all died at the same time. So we commemorate that by mentioning them all at the same time. Interesting idea. Rabbi Yochanan, Vav devaizata tzarich lemimitcha bezekifa kemordaya de lavrut. The Vav of the word vaizata, which is one of the sons of Haman, needs to be stretched like the poles of the boatsmen of the river Labrut. I don't know what Labrut is. But anyways, the point is, it needs to be stretched and elongated. That Vav vaizata, you see it stretched in the Megillah. It's written long. My time, what's the reason? Kulu b'chadzekifa is the kifu, because they were all hung on one pole. I always imagine that they had a pole with a bunch of pegs on it or whatever it was, and they hung all these guys on it. I'm not sure exactly what the symbolism in that is. There must be some significance to that. Rabbi Chanina bar Papa darash Rav Shila ish kvar tamarta. Kol hashirot kulan nichtavot ariach al gabi leveina. Now, in the Torah, we find that there's many places, I should say, there's a series of places where you have shirot. There's songs that are sung. You have different shirot. You have shirat devorah, you have different shirot that are sung. Az yashir, you have many shirot. Usually, it's a half brick on top of a full brick. Now, what that means is, if you look how it's written, Az yashir is a good example. Az yashir, if you look in the Torah, it's written incrementally. Blank space, words, blank space, and then on top of that you have words, blank space, words. I'm not sure I'm describing this very thoroughly, but what it means is that the words are not all in one paragraph. They're not all in one paragraph. Rather, there's blank spaces between. The reason I use the example of bricks is because that's how you lay bricks, is that you don't put, when you build a building, bricks one on top of the other, but rather you set them up, two with one on top, and then two on top of that with one on top, and then you put them on the sides surrounding it. So most of the shirot in the Torah, in Tanakh really, are written in that type of a formation. Space, word, space, and then on top of that, word, space, word. It's written like stacked on top of each other. What's that?
Like bricks.
Like bricks, exactly. However, not this example. That's the point we're about to mention. The Gemara says, Chutz, besides for Mishira Zo, this Shira means the Megillah is not written that way, means the Vaizata. We find that the names of Haman, of his children, they're written actually in one column. Umalchei Canaan, as well as Malchei Canaan. We list the kings of Canaan, which is, I believe, when the Jews were fighting in Eretz Yisrael, conquering the land. One second. Yeah, I believe that's what it was referring to. Sha'ariach al gabi ariach. You have a half brick on a half brick, or leveina al gabi leveina, and a full brick on top of a full brick. Meaning is that it's actually written in paragraph formation, not in steps, not like bricks like we just described. My time, what's the reason? Shalot heit kuma lemapalatan, because we're talking about their downfall. So you don't want to make it like a brick formation as if they could step up and regain their prominence. It's to say once they fall off legamre. I always think about this. I think like in the video games. You know those video games of like Mario? You ever played that? Yeah. You know what I'm talking about? You jump like the things. So I always understood like the old, they don't today. I don't know if they play those things anymore, but those ones that you jump from one side to the other, you give them the ability to, here they just fall off and there's nothing to jump. You're done. It says, the king said to Esther HaMalkah that in Shushana Bira, Yehudim, the Jews killed. This is after the Jews defend themselves on the day that the Goyim were supposed to kill them. So the Jews defended themselves and they killed in Shushana Bira a certain number of people. Amar Rabbi Yavo, Melamed, it teaches us, what happened was, one second, sorry. The Gemara is pointing out that initially it seems like Achashverosh speaks to Esther in an angry voice, and then afterwards he says, Ma'ashe elatech, he says, what is it that you want? Now you can understand a little bit here is that what's going on over here is you're going to have some sort of a war. The Goyim are going to fight against the Jews, and the Jews defend themselves. What ends up happening is Goyim and Shushan are going to be killed. That's what's happening. So Achashverosh is not a big Jew lover. We spoke about that already. He wasn't so excited. So initially the pasuk seems to imply that he spoke in a way of kas, of anger. And then afterwards he says, Mashe elatech, he says, what can I do for you? So the Gemara says, what does it teach us? Melamed, it teaches us that a malach came and hit him on his mouth, meaning it corrected his speech. And then it says, when she came in front of the king, Amar ima sefer. So it says, she said with the book. Now what does it mean she said with the book? But the Gemara says, Amar, why does it say Amar? Amrami baile. If it's her talking, it should really say, she spoke. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rashi takes these words out, Amra lo. But what the Gemara is teaching us is, not in terms of her conversation, but rather, Yomar bepeh ma shekatuv besefer. It's telling us, in regards to the mitzvah of Purim, when we read the Megillah, we have to say with our mouth what's written in the book. Meaning to say is, that we actually have to read the psukim from the sefer. You can't read Megillat Esther by heart. You have to read it from the sefer. One second. Right. As Rashi explains, this is really referencing that Mordechai commanded, this is what we need to do in the future. Whatever it is that's written in this Sefer, in Megillat Esther, you can't just read it by heart. It's not Torah Sheba'al Peh. It's Torah Shebechtav. You read it out of the book to be Yotzei. It says, Divrei Shalom ve'emet, that these are words of peace and truth. Amar Rabbi Tanchum v'amir la'amar Rabbi Asi, Melamed shetzricha sirtut kamita shel Torah. The Torah is also referred to as Shalom ve'emet. So we see from this that it requires sirtut like a Torah itself. Sirtut is the underlines. They use a razor to make lines underneath the letters. It's straight, meaning it creates a straightening by mezuzah also. So just like a Torah requires that, Megillat Esther does as well. Uma'amar Esther kayem, it says they validated the words of Esther. So the Gemara says, wait a second, what do you mean they validated? They kept Purim. Ma'amar Esther in Divrei Tzomot lo. The question the Gemara wonders is, they accepted the words of Esther, but not the words of fasting, meaning it implies only, one second. Can I have our for a minute? I'm trying to understand that step. Thank you. Make sure I get that clear. Oh, okay. Right. The way the Gemara understands the pasuk is saying is that what caused the miracle? The words of Esther, means her involvement. So the Gemara says only her involvement. What about the fasting? We know the Jews fasted for 3 days. There was a group effort here. So the Gemara answers, Divrei tzomot lo, but it did the fast not contribute? Divrei tzomot lo amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Divrei tzomot uma'amar Esther kayem. Kayem et yemei divrei Purim ha'ela. So rather what it means is, the fasting as well as Esther's involvement caused this miracle of Purim, for the miracle. Fine. Let's continue. So pasuk says, Ki Mordechai Yehudi Mishnah lemelech Achashverosh vegadol haYehudim v'ratzoy lerov achav. The Gemara tells us an unbelievable thing here. At the end of the story, you would imagine Mordechai was involved in saving the Jewish people. Esther, Mordechai, you'd think that they would love Mordechai and put him on a pedestal, and the Jews would say, thank you, thank you, thank you. But that's not what the pasuk says. What does it say? Mordechai Yehudi was second in command to Achashverosh, v'gadol haYehudim, and he was great for the Jewish people, v'ratzoy lerov echav, and he was desired by most of his brethren. Rov. He only was appreciated by most of the Jewish people. So the Gemara says, L'rov echav v'lo l'kol echav. He was only appreciated by most of them, not by all of them. Milamed, this teaches us, shepirshu mimenu miktzat Sanhedrin. Some of the Sanhedrin separated from him. This is an unbelievable thing. So Rashi explains why. What was their complaint against him? So Rashi says, because he was batel midivrei Torah and he entered l'srara. Since he accepted this position as Mishneh L'Melech, of second in command to Achashverosh, he was therefore not learning Torah as much, and therefore some of the Sanhedrin separated from Mordechai. Say to yourself, he had to, this was part of the Geulah, he needed to. Nonetheless, he separated, and therefore some of them, it's unbelievable, Rov Echav. The problem is you take positions of authority and then you don't get involved in Torah as much as you need to, but... Rav Yosef says, this brings us now to really carry us till the end of the parak. Rav Yosef says, Gadol Talmud Torah yoter me'atzalat nefashot, is that greater is the Torah study than saving lives. Can you imagine, Yosef? Unbelievable.
I can't believe it.
You can't believe it.
That truth.
Yeah, well, Rav Yosef does. Rav Yosef, you see, your namesake. Because originally when Mordechai is listed after the officers, it said his name after 4 of the Chachamim. Ulubisof, and in the end, Batar Chamisha. He's listed after 5 of the Chachamim. Because Me'karach Ktiv, in Sefer Ezra, when it talks about it before accepting positions of authority, it says, Asher Ba'u al Zerubbabel, they came with Zerubbabel, Yeshua, Nehemiah, Seraya, Ra'alia, and Mordechai. Mordechai is listed after 4 of the Chachamim. And then Bilshan. Ula Bisof, I guess Mordechai and Bilshan is the same person. Ula Bisof, and in the end, in Nehemiah Ktiv, it says, Habaim em Zerubbabel, those who came with Zerubbabel, Yeshua, Nehemiah, Azariah, Ra'amya, Nachmeni, Mordechai, Bilshan. It lists him after 5 of the Chachamim. So what you see is, he lost a step because he got involved, even though it wasn't saving lives. It's an unbelievable thing. Nonetheless, that automatically causes some sort of a drop-off. I don't know what to make of that exactly. You have to know what the pshat is. But even though the chara was necessary, he needed to get involved here. Nonetheless, he lost a step because he wasn't as involved in Torah as he should have been, perhaps. Amar Rav Yitem Rav Shmuel bar Marta Gadol Talmud Torah Yoter Binyan Beit HaMikdash. Greater is Torah study than building the Beit HaMikdash. Can you imagine? We always say we want to build the Beit HaMikdash, and if we're involved in Torah study, it's even greater. Because as long as Baruch ben Neriah was around, Lo enichu Ezra va'ala. Ezra was the student of Baruch ben Neriah, and Baruch ben Neriah was living with him in Bavel. And as long as his Rebbe Baruch ben Neriah was alive, Ezra did not ascend from Galut to Eretz Yisrael to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash. But once he passed away, then he went up. So you see, he valued his Torah study more than rebuilding the Beit HaMikdash. Unbelievable. All right, we're going to stop here. Amar Rabba. We'll pick up with this tomorrow. Bezat Hashem, we'll stop. And we'll finish the first parak tomorrow, God willing. With Zayin and with Aleph. Tzat Hashem. Tiyah.
Thank you.